Hey, this is Michael Smith with the Bluefield Group at Keller Williams, and today I'm here with Kevin Brady of Guest & Brady Attorneys at Law, one of our go-to real estate attorneys that handle a lot of our closings. And today I want to talk about what goes on behind the scenes once we're under contract. The title search, all that good stuff. I want to talk about title insurance, why it's important and why you guys need it. So Kevin, once we write a contract, buyer and seller have agreed to the terms. I know the buyer's working with the lender to get all that stuff put together, but we send you the file, and a lot of stuff happens behind the scenes that people might not know about. So once you guys get that contract, what goes on from that point?
Okay, well, once we get a file from you guys, we order a title abstract, and that typically what they do is that's an individual goes down to the county records, and they search going back 40 to 60 years of the ownership of the property, and they're looking for mortgages, any kind of defects in the record as well, such as unsatisfied mortgages, judgments, liens against people, any kind of easements or right-of-ways that might affect the property, from utility easements to easements for right-of-ways for individuals to use driveways and that kind of stuff. So once they do that, they put all that together and give it to me, and then I do an opinion for the lender that allows us to issue a title insurance policy to the lender, telling them that we're going to insure this policy, that the title that they're loaning their money against is a good title.
Okay, because the property is basically collateral for their loan, right? So they want to make sure that they've got first dibs, right? So that property has to stand, without any type of, I guess, defects is the word that you use, right?
That's correct.
So we don't want people coming out of the woodwork saying that they have some type of claim to the property.
A lot of times you have old probate issues where back 20, 30 years ago, probate records weren't quite as strict as they are today.
Okay.
And so a lot of times you'll have estates that aren't fully administered, or they administered the estate but they didn't do deeds of distribution, they didn't, somebody got left out of a estate, heirs, that kind of stuff. So all of that kind of stuff is looked into and help protect not only the lender but also the buyers, that somebody 10 years from now is not going to come back and say, hey, you really don't own that property.
Right. Okay. So you mentioned title insurance. So I know that there's a policy that protects the lender, right, in their interest. What about owners? I know there's owner's insurance, right, owner's title insurance. So talk to us about that.
Correct. So we issue owner's title insurance policies, and that protects the owner, that they have good title of that property, that their neighbor's fence is not encroaching upon their property lines, that their neighbors don't have the right to drive their four-wheelers across their back of their property. Anything that out of the ordinary that gives somebody else an interest in their property, this ensures that that isn't out there. And if it is, and it's discovered, then the title insurance company comes in and they pay for that. Okay.
So what's an example maybe of a scenario where after closing, months or even years later, someone has come and said, I have an interest in your property?
So this was an interesting one. It was maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, but there was a property in Spartanburg, and the people had bought this lot, and it was off an old plat, and the back of their property was actually a creek. So we got some really good descriptions in South Carolina where we use creeks, and we use the old rock in the southwest corner of the property line, and this one ran across followed the creek line. Well, when they purchased the property, they had about 275 foot back to the back of their property line to the creek, and a developer bought the land behind them and developed the property into a subdivision. Well, when they did that, the stormwater management system that they used caused the creek to move in almost about 75 foot.
Oh, wow.
And so when they sold those lots, the developer sold them to the creek line, the new creek line. And so my buyer had contacted us, we contacted title insurance company. They got together and they actually ended up going to about 10 of the people along this creek that had moved, property owners, and they got together and the title insurance company filed that lawsuit on behalf of all those owners and made them definitively move that property line back to where it originally was, at 75 foot. So that's an example of how title insurance can protect you.
Wow.
Sometimes things have happened that aren't of record, that even if we do our job and we have the abstracts done and things pop up that you wouldn't necessarily expect. I've had 2 instances now where the sellers weren't the most moral people in the world, and they ended up having the U.S. attorneys did executions against their property. But the people came in and sold their property to my purchasers within a couple days of the U.S. Attorney's Office filing the execution in the county. So we did our closing, a couple days later, execution gets filed, and in one instance they actually took the property from the purchaser for about 90 days. And the title insurance company stepped in and ended up doing, they ended up doing the arguing for the person who has the title policy, the owner who purchased it, and in that case they got the property back from the U.S. Attorney's Office for that error.
Okay. So I think the moral of the story is get title insurance, right? It's a one-time cost, is that right? Not an annual fee like most insurance policies?
It's a one-time cost, and it's every lender requires that you buy them a lender's policy. So especially when you're buying that owner's policy on top of the lender's policy, it's extremely cheap. It's typically just over $100 for an owner's policy when it's on top, built in with that lender's policy.
And so that'll protect me from anything that happened in the chain of title.
Yes.
Okay.
And not only it even protects you after you sell the property. So it's for the lifetime.
So that's probably one of the best values that exists in the insurance world, right?
It is. It's the least talked about because it's one of those expenses that really isn't that much comparatively when you're talking about the purchase of a house.
Okay. And I know nowadays with the new closing disclosure that rolled out with Trade a few years ago, they specify on there that owner's title insurance is optional.
Yes.
And so I've had a lot of people ask me, do I really need this? And of course the answer is yes. All right, so if y'all have any specific questions about title insurance, give us a call. We can connect you with Kevin and answer any specific questions you have. But again, moral of the story, get title insurance. All right, well, I'll see you guys on the next one.
Thank you.